Like Phana, Vyayoga also has only one Anka, and its plot and the hero are well known to the readers. In a Vyayoga, there will be more men characters than women characters. Vyayoga requires only three sandhis such as Mukha, Pratimukha and Nirvahana. It can be composed in Bharati, Satvadi or Arabhati vrittis. The hero can be either a renowned king or a divine character. It is imperative that the hero should be courageous and noble. Scholars often opine that Hasya, Shringara and Shanta rasas should not come as the dominant rasa of Vyayoga. In his Sahitya Darpana, Vishwanatha gives Saugandhika Harana as the example of Vyayoga. Bhasa's Madhyama Vyayoga can also be considered an example of this genre. Samavakara. The story that a Samavakara deals with should be well known and famous to the readers, and the major characters in it include Devas and Asuras, or gods and demons. It includes only three Ankas and four Sandhis, namely Mukha, Pratimukha, Garbha and Nirvahana. In the first Anka, Mukha and Pratimukha Sandhis should be deployed. The second Anka should contain Garbha, and the last Anka must include Nirvahana. There are 12 famous characters in a Samavakara, and they can be either gods or demons. In Samavakara, each character will have a separate and independent goal to achieve, and obviously its predominant rasa will be Veera rasa, or the aesthetic emotion of the heroic. The theme of the Samavakara is concerned with the means of obtaining the desired objective, worthy of gods and demons. The incidents mentioned in the first Anka should be complete in 12 hours, those in the second Anka in 4 hours, and finally the incidents mentioned in the third Anka must be over with a span of within a span of 2 hours. I think a bit of a clarification is required here. When I say that the incidents mentioned in the first Anka should be complete in 12 hours, I do not mean to say that the incidents presented on the stage should actually take 12 hours. What I am driving at is that the time span of the events in the story portrayed in the Samavakara should not overshoot the time span of 12 hours. For example, in the first Anka of Swapnavasavadatta, there is a reference that the time at which the Brahmachari comes is the noon. By the time the Brahmachari leaves, we are told that it is evening. So the events mentioned in the first Anka gets over in 12 hours, although the actual portrayal of the events does not take that much time. A Samavakara should necessarily involve Shringara, deceit and retreat. Bharata mentions Amrita Bandhana as an example of Samavakara. Dima. Dima deals with a well-known story that involves magic, illusion, battle, agitation, etc. The dominant rasa in a Dima will always be Raudra, or the aesthetic emotion of anger. It is exalted or Udata heroes who fight for justice are 16 in number. They should be gods, Gandharvas, Yakshas, Bhudas, Pretas, Pishachas and the like. All of them are of violent type. A Dima will have 4 Ankas, and it should not have Praveshaka and Vishkambha. Now what are Vishkambhaka and Praveshaka? It's a dramatic device through which the spectators will be informed of events that had already happened and that are going to happen. This is placed at the beginning of an Anka. There are 2 kinds of Vishkambhakas, namely Shuddha and Sankirna. Shuddha is that kind of Vishkambhaka where 1 or 2 middling characters will take part. If an inferior character and a middling character come together, this will be called a Sankirna Vishkambhaka. Praveshaka is also very much similar to Vishkambhaka, but only inferior characters take part in it. So this is not placed at the beginning of the first Anka, but it can be placed at the beginning of any Anka other than the first one. A Dima is usually composed in Arabhati or Satvadi Vrittis. There are 4 Vrittis, namely Kaishigi, Satvadi, Arabhati and Bharati. Kaishigi suits Sringara, Satvadi suits Veera, Arabhati is the right choice for Raudra and Bhibatsa. Arabhati Vritti involves events like magic, illusion, battle, anger and agitation. It has got 4 Ankas or limbs such as Vastusthapana or the erection of a homestead, Sambheda or the mutual conflict or encounter of angry persons, Samkshipti or the sudden change in the character of the hero, and finally Avavatana or the scene during which a person enters the stage in terror but leaves at the end in good humor. Satvadi Vritti is used to express Shaurya or heroism, kindness or daya, honesty, etc. This style will be teeming with wonder and happiness and will be bereft of shoka. Now, Dima should have all the santhis that we saw in a Nataka. An example for Dima is Tripura Dahana, where Shiva burns down 3 cities. The Dima contains the 6 exciting rasas except for the Hasya rasa or the aesthetic emotion of the comic, and the Sringara rasa or the aesthetic emotion of the erotic, and Shanta rasa or the aesthetic emotion of the peaceful. Now, there are 16 heroes and subsidiary heroes in a Dima, and they are shown at different stages of the play. The heroic Nayaka is the leading character in the play, but such types as gods, serpent kings, angels, yaksha, etc. also figure in the play. Abhinavagupta says that the Dima has all the elements that are in the Nataka. The difference being that in the Dima, the santhis and rasas are incomplete, having neither the introduction nor the pause. Īhāmṛga. In Ihamrga, the villain will be in pursuit of obtaining a heroine who is hard to be obtained, just like a hunter hunting an animal that is very difficult to be captured. It is from this analogy that this genre takes its name from. It contains 4 Ankas, and the plot of the story will be partly known and partly the product of the poet's imagination. This has only 3 santhis, namely Mukha, Pratimukha and Nirvahana. Both a human being and a god can take the role of a hero and a villain. There is no hard and fast rules as to who should take the role of a hero and a villain, but it is mandatory that both the hero and the villain should be famous and well known to the readers. The heroine of the Ihamrga is always a Divyastri or a celestial beauty, and the villain in the story intends to obtain her through negotiation or abduction. So it will inevitably involve rasabhasa or the semblance of rasa. Rasabhasa is that situation wherein a particular rasa fails to come into being despite the presence of all the components congenial for the production of that particular rasa, precisely because the emotion is presented in an indecorous manner or is directed towards an improper object. Any sentiment or feeling that is developed in an improper and objectionable manner is called rasabhasa or bhavabhasa. We will see it soon. A classic example of rasabhasa that Abhinavagupta cites in his commentary on Anandavardhana's Dhvanyaloka is Ravana's love for Sita. According to Abhinavagupta, Sita being another man's wife and a divine being, Ravana's advances towards Sita are highly improper and do not generate Sringara rasa, although Ravana does everything that one is supposed to do to express erotic emotion or Sringara rasa. There will be at least 10 divine or human Pataka Nayakas in an Ihamrga. A Pataka Nayaka is an ally of the hero who helps the former towards the fruition of his aims, but attaining some end of his own through the cooperation. Bharata reminds us that if a character in the Ihamrga who belongs to the noble category gets killed in the original story, the playwright should avoid this situation. Satvadi and Arabhati vrittis, which are the characteristics of the aggressive types of plays, are often used to compose Ihamrgas. The gentle Kaishiki vritti should not be used to compose the Ihamrga. So far as its actions are concerned, the Veera, Krodha and Bhayanaga are the prominent rasas we can find in Ihamrga. The Rukmini Haranam by Vatsaraja is said to be a good example of Ihamrga type of Rupaka. Anka. An Anka has only one Anka. To distinguish it from Nataka, some people call it Ulkrishtanga. Ulkrishtanga is a sort of an epilogue which follows the end of a battle. It introduces to the readers the disastrous consequences of a sanguinary battle, and in that it should serve as an object lesson for all those who believe that war alone is the means to resolve all the disputes in the world. The Ulkrishtanga has only two junctures or sandhis, namely Mukha or the opening and Nirvahana or the conclusion. Although it deals with the post-battle episodes, it does not depict actions from the battle per se. Dhananjaya particularly says that the events like fights, battles or victory or defeat etc. should only be reported by the speaker. It is significant to note that the treatment of the subject in Ulkrishtanga is natural and realistic, just in the way the common people behave in their lives. So the speech in Anka may not be very sophisticated, and it does express anxiety, despair and lamentation of the women. The dominant rasas of Anka are karuna or the aesthetic emotion of pathos and bivatsa or revulsion. The Ulkrishtanga by Bhasa is said to be the best example of Ulkrishta type of Rupaka. Vithi has only one Anka, and the hero can be of noble, middling or the inferior type. He will be a character newly created by the poet. It is mandatory that there should not be more than one important male character in Vithi. In Vithi, the episodes from mythologies and popular tales are narrated by use of clever and inventive witty dialogues. Vithi is chiefly of conversational style, and it often uses the device called Akasha Bhashida or speaking off the stage. It's supposed speech to which a reply is made as if it had been actually spoken and heard. Bharata enumerates the 13 types of speech in Vithi, namely Udgatyaga, Avalagida, Avaspandida, Asatpralapa, Prabanja, Naliga, Vakeli, Athivala, Chala, Vyavahara, Mridava, Trigada, Ganda. If men connect words of obscure meaning with words other than those intended by the speaker, it becomes Udgatya or accidental interpretation. It is the type of speech where the hero inadvertently attains a different purpose along with the intended one. In Avaspandida, a misinterpretation of a word leads to the exact opposite of the true meaning of the word. Asat Pralapa is the form of speech where a learned person advises a fool to do the right thing, but the latter chooses to ignore the good advice. Asat Pralapa can also occur when an irrelevant question is followed by an equally irrelevant answer. Prabanja is that kind of a speech where two persons praise and compliment each other by using false but funny sounding words. Naliga is a remark that gives rise to laughter. Vakeli is a repartee or a counter speech that involves a series of questions followed by witty replies producing the comic effect. Athivala is a form of speech in which both parties are forced to modify or revise their statements. Thus, each tries to outdo the other. Chala is a type of deceit when, During the course of an argument, one party tries to mislead the opponent by making nonsensical statements in order to frustrate or ridicule the other one. Vyavahara is a fearless declaration made in the presence of the hero. Mridava is a form of speech where one ridicules the opponent by belittling the opponent's merits to make the latter look worthless and a blemish too. Trigada is a dignified and humorous discussion carried on by three characters. Ganda is the heat of the situation, and due to excitement, confusion and agitation, one bursts out with disjointed statements, wrong words and hurling abuses at the opponent. Prahasana. A prahasana aims to generate laughter in the readers or spectators. So hasya rasa, or the aesthetic emotion of the comic, will be the dominant rasa of this form of rupaka. A prahasana is very much similar to bhana. Prahasana always deals with the life of degenerate ones. A Brahmin or an ascetic will be the typical hero of a prahasana. The hasya rasa in prahasana is of two kinds, namely Shuddha or pure and Mishra or mixed. The characters of the Shuddha prahasana will include heretics, hypocrites, Brahmins, ascetics, men and maid servants, etc. Although it includes conversations, provoking humor, it is actually devoid of obscenity and falsehood. The Shuddha prahasana is always performed with appropriate costumes and language. And what about the Mishra or the mixed? The Mishra or the mixed variety includes characters like eunuchs, prostitutes, rogues, sycophants, parasites, etc. The major themes in this type include hypocrisy, tricks, squabbling and so on. Unlike the Shuddha variety, the characters in the mixed or Mishra prahasana appear wearing flashy costumes, and they are uncouth, garish and loud. Apart from providing amusement to the spectators, a prahasana instructs the spectators by ridiculing the improper characters and thereby advising the good folks to be on guard against the possible exploitation by the wicked ones or the unscrupulous elements in the society. In its structure, the prahasana has only two sandhis or junctures, namely mukha or the opening and nirvahana or the conclusion. Bhagavad Judam or of Bodhayana and Mattavilasa Prahasana of the Pallava king Mahendravarman are the two examples of Prahasana in Sanskrit drama. Bhagavada Jugam is the earliest surviving example of a Prahasana. Bhagavada Jugams is essentially an episode about the transmigration of souls and a discussion on Hindu dharma. It primarily makes fun of the doctrines of Buddhism, which posed a strong challenge to the dominance and infallibility of Hinduism. The play opens with a discussion on Hindu dharma between a master and a disciple. But while the master is talking about dharma, the disciple's attention gets diverted to a woman in the garden nearby. As the discussion goes on, the woman is bitten by a snake and she dies. The disciple is deeply affected by this. The yogi makes use of this opportunity to demonstrate his yogic powers, and this transfers the soul of his disciple into the woman's body. Suddenly, she rises and continues the philosophical discussion. It hilariously presents the confusion that follows when the soul of a hermit and a courtesan get interchanged. The work also exposes the practices of sham mendicants and lampoons the degeneration of the contemporary society. And Mattavilasa Prahasana is a satire that makes fun of the heretic Kapalika and Pashupata Shaivite sects, Buddhism and Jainism. The play revolves around the drunken antics of a Kapalika mendicant, Satyasoma, his fiancée Devasoma, and the loss and recovery of their skull bowl. The cast of the of characters consists of Satyasoma, an unorthodox Shaivite mendicant, Devasoma, Satyasoma's female partner, a Buddhist monk named Nagasena, Pashupata, a member of another unorthodox Shaivite order, and a madman. The act describes a quarrel between a drunken Satyasoma and the Buddhist monk Nagasena, when the begging bowl of the former goes missing. The inebriated Satyasoma suspects the Buddhist monk of stealing his begging bowl, but after a drawn out argument it is found to have been taken away by a dog. These are the 10 Rupakas that Natyashastra mentions. I hope you have understood this lesson. Soon we will see the 18 Uparupakas. Thank you.